welcome to the first video of the channel. Today we're going to be focused on 6 things to avoid when communicating. This is more so towards when you're having an argument, miscommunication, fighting, things in that kind of nature, right? It's not just everyday typical conversation. This is more specific things. So first thing that we're going to start off with is global labeling. So better known as labeling or name calling, it's basically using specific words such as stupid, ugly, selfish, and etc. towards an individual. And what this does is it's basically commenting on a specific behavior of theirs, but in a rude way. And it depends on the context. You know, say for example, you're a parent, you walk into your child's room, you see they got a bunch of dishes, they got clothes freaking everywhere, thrown across the room. I don't know, maybe there's a dirt on the walls, there's blood on the walls. I don't know, get crazy with your imagination, whatever. Maybe not blood, that sounds psychopathic, but anywho, continuing. And you walk into that room, you see your kid, room's a mess basically, and you just go, and you just say to them, "You are such a pig." That would be known as a global label, where you're labeling them, name calling them, and it's not constructive at all. So, what you need to do, an alternative to this, I should say, is finding a way to comment on their specific behavior without name calling them. So, without saying something as stupid, ugly, selfish, you're a pig, words that hurt. That will help you a lot. Instead of telling your kid you are such a pig in that situation, tell them you are very dirty and I would like you to be more cleanly. You know, that's a lot better than telling them you're such a pig. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Second one is bringing up the past. So, pretty self-explanatory, but just in case, this basically references to bringing things from the past, whether that be past arguments, fights, situations, etc., to the present situation at hand. So, say maybe you're currently having a discussion or some kind of talk about something you didn't like or something the other didn't like, and you decide to bring up stuff from the past. Well, instead of focusing on the current situation at hand, you're too busy focusing on the past situation at hand, which diverts the attention, and now you have that communication misconstrued. That's, you don't want to be doing this. So, it is difficult sometimes. And from what I've observed, most people usually do this because they haven't accepted the past or previous emotions that they felt in certain situations. And you know, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you have to learn to move on. You have to learn to accept and move on so that old wounds won't reopen to yourself. And it's easier said than done. I struggle with this, and I guarantee you every single person at least struggles with one thing like this. So, but it takes effort and it takes time. A good alternative to this is instead of bringing up the past, try your best to focus on the current situation. You know, that keeps you off of things from the past. You need to focus on what's now, not what has been. So keep that in mind. Focus on now, what has not been. Alright, going to the third one, which is sarcasm. I'm not very good with sarcasm. I'm just gonna go through this side. Cause I don't really get sarcasm too much. But anyways, it's basically mocking someone with the use of irony. It's typically rude, right? And it's often covered up by feelings of hurt or anger, and is meant to push the other, leaving them with anger or making them feel bad, making them feel less about themselves. You know, the good thing about sarcasm is you can use this towards your friends or family to poke fun at, maybe acquaintances, just a little light fun, but don't use this in a serious conversation. It's just gonna hurt you and possibly the other person that you're talking to, right? Next up, we got you messages. So, you messages are basically saying things like, you don't care about me, or you don't love me anymore, and this attacks a person directly. And it's meant to blame or directly hurt that individual. If you never had someone kind of like point a finger at you, you're pretty lucky because that stuff hurts. It doesn't matter what it is, it hurts. At least in my experience, you know. And it's not something good. It's not something good to do, and it's not something nice to receive because on the receiving end, you feel like you feel hurt. Your self-esteem lowers a little bit, and you become a little bit insecure about yourself on whatever it was, you know. So if you find yourself that you do these you messages saying basically like you don't care about me or you don't love me, for example, the alternative is to find a more thoughtful manner. And what I mean by that is instead of saying you don't love me anymore, say something more constructive like lately it doesn't seem as if you feel attracted to me like before. Do you see the difference there? There's not a blaming. You don't love me anymore. That's blaming, right? When you say, for example, lately it doesn't seem you feel as attracted to me like before, that's you expressing yourself. That's you not blaming them, but seeing that there's something something weird or something off about them, and this allows that person to open up. That's awesome. That's the way it should be. So try to find those alternatives. Be more constructive instead of blaming or saying like the you messages like you don't do this for me or you never done this. Be constructive about it because you also have to remember that person on the other end also has emotions. You don't want to hurt them, but you want to have them understand you, right? Next is threats. So I feel like this would be self-explanatory too, but it's important. It's important. So threats or being threatening is basically someone who is acting or speaking in a hostile-like behavior. So they could be potentially violent. Maybe they're hitting the walls. Maybe they're yelling and screaming, um, cursing up a storm. I don't know, kicking crap. That kind of behavior is threatening and it's endangering. You know what I mean? So these people can these people who do threats or are threatening in this way can potentially become hostile, where they may become physically violent, and that's where you want to avoid. If you're on the receiving end, obviously you want to avoid that, and if you are the person doing it, you don't want to do that because there's always consequences in the end. So if you find yourself that you are a person who is like this, who basically gets built up on their emotions and starts acting in a violent manner, step away from that person. Or whatever it is that's pissing you off. Go take a walk or something. Do something. Go take a breath and recollect yourself. Because what's better is to be calm and collected and think about what's going on rather than acting in an irrational way and potentially having something happen that you may not have wanted to happen. Or maybe you could have, like for example, you could have hurt somebody, or whether that be physical or emotional, or maybe you destroyed something because you were pissed off at it that was really important to you. One second. Excuse me. That's what you want to step away from, take a breath, and be calm about, because when you come back to it, you're going to be like, oh crap, I messed up. More than likely, obviously, not every person's like that, but in this case, yeah. And lastly, we got comparing, and this is in a negative sense. So, Negative comparing is basically you are comparing an individual to someone else's actions and behaviors. So, let's take, for example, I'm a boyfriend of some girl. Actually, I'll use a real world example because I had an ex girlfriend do this. So, for example, my ex girlfriend, she compared me to one of her brother's friends. I'm not going to say names out of respect. Um, and she basically told me, this was about 2 years ago, basically told me things like, you don't care about me, you never loved me. Tino does all these amazing things for me, like he buys me gifts and he makes me food. Last week we went out to make some fairy garden. Why don't you ever do this with me? She's comparing my behavior towards him and what he's doing. That's comparing me negatively because that's making me look like I'm somewhat bad, somewhat evil in comparison to this dude that's doing awesome things for her, right? That's negatively comparing. Doesn't feel good, doesn't feel great, makes you feel like crap. You know, it makes that person, or in my sense as well, it makes you feel inferior, makes you feel insecure, lowers your self esteem, and in my case, you kind of start acting different. At least for me, I was acting a little different for a little while because I was insecure, right? So, the alternative to this is be positive and constructive when you're comparing. There's negative and positive comparing. You can compare someone in a positive way. So, like for example, it could be like a specific behavior that they have going on that needs to be changed or maybe looked at. You can try to help them see that by comparing their behavior with somebody else that maybe they should be referencing to or looking up to, you know? And other ways that you can do this is just basically trying to find ways to make them see their faults or things that they're doing incorrectly without lowering them. Don't lower their self-worth. Don't lower their self-esteem. Make sure that they understand that what's going on. You know, if they did something that hurt you, or maybe they stopped doing something that you enjoyed, or maybe they need to do something to improve themselves, you need to address it in a correct manner, but try and do it in a way that doesn't hurt them. Of course, easier said than done. Takes practice, right? But those are the 6 things to avoid when communicating, specifically in arguments, fights, blah blah blah. And thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts below, like, share, and subscribe.